Education is such a key element of enabling this approach to become mainstream. And it's not just an education of oncologists, it's education of the payers, it's education of the regulators. And one of the groups that can play a vital role in this, or one group that can play a vital role, is really the patient advocacy groups. One of the things that we did a couple of weeks ago here at Foundation Medicine is we invited in 10 of the most well-respected patient advocacy groups in the country. And we spent about a day and a half in the company talking to them about this very issue. How do we educate patients? How do we educate oncologists? What role can they play? What role should we play? And I'll tell you, I learned more in that one day than I think I've learned in any one day in a long time, because it really is a different perspective. It's the patient's perspective. The only thing they care about is driving the advancement of cancer therapy forward. That's it. It's how can we maximize the benefit of this new technology, of everything that we're learning about cancer for patients. And education is perhaps the single most important underpinning of that revolution in cancer care. And so we have to think about the advocacy groups, because if you work closely with them, they'll get the message out for you. That's critical. We have to think about the oncologists, though. The oncologists are central to this migration of cancer care, especially out of the academic medical centers into the communities around the United States. So data, oncologists are data driven, and that's why this company has spent so much time and effort on really developing the data, putting together the retrospective and prospective clinical studies. We partner with many of the major cancer centers in the United States and overseas, and pharmaceutical companies, to really generate the data to demonstrate that this is something that this approach with next generation sequencing and its application in oncology will ultimately have a dramatic impact in the way that we think about caring for patients with cancer. Education comes in the form of working with the FDA. We have met with the FDA multiple times. We've met with their new technology group. And perhaps the most important thing that I can identify in our discussions with the FDA is not that they've sorted through how to work with next generation sequencing. They haven't. It's complex. It's a new technology. It's going to take time. So there's an understanding at the FDA level that this technology will likely have a significant impact on the way that pharmaceutical companies perform their clinical trials. It allows them to be much more targeted and ideally much more efficient in their approach to clinical trials. The FDA understands that. Pharmaceutical companies understand that. The FDA also is starting to understand that not only can this technology be impactful at the level of the clinical trial, it can be impactful at the level of the clinic, of how oncologists select their therapies for each of the patients that walks in the door. And so I'm optimistic, because while the FDA has not worked through all the issues, we shouldn't expect them to have worked through all the issues. This technology is just starting to hit the clinic, and I say that all the time. This is not, it's not a criticism of payers, it's not a criticism of the FDA. The technology has accelerated in the past couple of years. It's not as if we've all been sitting around doing nothing for 20 years and saying, oh, now it's time to deal with next generation sequencing. It's now hitting the clinic, and it's happened extremely quickly. And so we really do have to work through these issues together. And again, the final piece goes back to the payers. I'm optimistic with the payers because the payers also understand it. They might not be as focused on the clinical trials, because that's the world of the FDA and the pharma world, but they are focused on making sure that they do get the right therapy to the patient, or the right therapies to the patient, to maximize the benefit that patient is going to receive, but also to minimize the side effects that patient might have if he or she receives the wrong therapy. And so we have a lot of different stakeholders here when it comes to education. We have patient stakeholders, we have oncologist stakeholders, we have payer stakeholders, and we have regulators at the FDA that are key stakeholders. Patient advocacy groups can play a role with each one of them, But we as a company, we as an industry, I think we as a community have to continue to focus on education for all of these groups. And if we do it well, we will see oncology continue to evolve extremely quickly.